Well, welcome to everyone listening to Talking Church. We're here, episode 100 and something, and I'm excited. It's a 4-person episode, so sometimes it gets a little bit rowdy, but the topic of today, as they probably saw from clicking on this, is talking about raising up young worship teams, next generation teams, but also teams that are good too, because you can get young people up on the platform and they might not be any good, or maybe they're not humble, and you're just trying to figure all that out. And so invited the 3 of you here today because you really do a great job at this. You work with our fine arts ministry. You are developing people. Ben and Bella, you work at our broadcast campus, Apple Valley. And then Emily, you are at a high school. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it would be good to have kind of different blends of broadcast, portable, high school, everything like that. Awesome. So maybe just quick introduce yourself, your official role on the team, and then I have a lot of questions that we can talk about that I'm sure people are curious about. And that's so, Bella, you can start.
Yeah. Well, my name is Bella Stebbins, and I work at the Apple Valley campus, like you said, with Ben, and I'm the associate worship leader.
And what do you typically oversee in worship? Like, you're doing Wednesdays?
Yes. Yeah, I typically kind of head Wednesdays, and then I'll also help out Saturdays and Sundays as well. So weekends but youth I get to own, which is really fun.
Cool.
She's actually in a new season of owning a little bit more for the weekends because now I'm the lead worship pastor as well. Mm-hmm. So Bella has taken on a lot of extra responsibility on weekends. She's amazing. So yeah, my name is Ben. I'm the Apple Valley worship pastor and the lead worship pastor as well.
And my name is Emily Havens. I'm the worship leader of our Maple Grove campus.
Yeah, and that's one of our newer campuses.
Yes.
And as mentioned, in a high school. Before we get into more specific questions, my goal of this episode is to be very practical in nature. So for those listening that are maybe they're at a smaller church and they may say, I have a lot of roles, and so I need help in this area because I'm worship leader, but I'm maybe associate pastor as well as all the other things that are needed. Or maybe they're at larger churches like us that have multiple staff members that are involved. But these principles really are aligned throughout everything. But when you think of, like, when you have a positive view of your team, what are the attributes that you're seeing among different volunteers, different leaders on your team, to where you say, this is a stress-free week or a stress-free month? Or like, if you would say, this is where my team is at its best, what would you describe that as? And then I think we can get into the practice on how that actually happens. But if you feel like you have an answer, jump in. But
I definitely do. Some of the things that I think are good litmus tests of a healthy team are they enjoy being with each other. They bring this attitude of unity with each other. Something that I'm really encouraged by right now is our Apple Valley team. When there's a new person on the team, I watch the team find each other in the lobby, even if they're not scheduled to go introduce themselves to the new team member, which I love. They feel like a family. They feel excited to be a part of something together. Another thing is preparation. People come prepared for rehearsal. That's not always the case. And I actually said to one of my pretty regular team members the other day, he said, I haven't even looked at the set until this morning. And I said, you should probably never say that again. You should always have looked at the set before you come. So those are the 2 biggest things for me, that they came prepared, ready to give their best, but also they came with like an excitement to get to do it in unity together.
Yep. Yeah. And I'd love to speak into that too, because as a mobile campus, we set up and tear down every single Sunday. We're there at 6 a.m. and we don't even start rehearsal until 7 or 7:15 a.m. And so I know that the health of the team is good when everyone is setting up joyfully. If we're laughing, if we are enjoying one another's company, I also know that's a great sign that we're in unity, we love each other, and we are excited to be here.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a big deal. A
lot of people, I'm sure, can resonate because most churches are portable, or especially when they're getting started, or maybe they have a building that doesn't have quite the gear needs, and so you have to make a lot of things set up. Do you have the entire band show up at 6 as well to help set up, or do vocalists come later, or what?
You know, I started off having vocalists come later, but I see the value in everyone coming at 6 a.m. to set up together, because you get to look at the end result. It's like after service 1 and you're like, oh my goodness, we are a part of practically building God's church in a physical way and a spiritual way. And so I wanted everyone on the team to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I would say, I would echo everything that you both have said. I think one thing I'll add to that is Sometimes not everyone's going to have the best energy, which is, again, something you can't control. But what I always remember, what I can control is my attitude. And so sometimes I like to make sure that I'm going to be in the best headspace, having the best spirit. And sometimes that's really changed the team, a whole 180, where especially working with youth students and teenagers, like sometimes they're always kind of in a mood. And so when they see me in a positive mood or trying to bring up the energy, it kind of helps lead the way for others to come along with me. So that's usually something that I try to do.
Totally. On the note of people getting them on the team and kind of focusing on developing young leaders, but I'm sure those listening are going to say these are applicable to everyone, whether they're, a 16-year-old kid who's just learning guitar lessons to somebody who says they've been playing guitar for a long time. But getting people on the team, onboarding, there's some challenges to that. There's people with gifts, but they don't use them. You don't even know that they exist. So how do we recruit people? How do we make it available in a church like ours to where it seems, I think from the outside looking in, we just have musicians everywhere, and every campus has a plethora. There's
I wish
too
that
many
was
people,
true.
right?
I wish that was true.
But I think that can be an assumption that even people in the congregation feel like, oh, you don't need my help.
Yeah.
So how have you, from the young person in youth at a portable campus, how have we recruited teams and gotten people involved? And then what's that onboarding process look like from there?
I will just start by saying we are in an interesting season at River Valley because we have the most campuses and the most services that we've ever had as a church, which is exciting, but it's a challenge to navigate as a department of worship leaders. How do we staff bands at a record number of services and campuses?
Yeah, in the Twin Cities, we have 12 campuses.
Yep.
And so that's a lot of services.
Yeah, it's a lot of services and a lot of bands. And then we also have Wednesday night youth as well, which we want bands at those events as well, at almost every campus. So we're navigating that together. We actually have a lot of interesting ways that we are recruiting people. I'm just going to talk about recruitment, and then I want to hear you guys speak on onboarding, especially young people, because you're doing that a lot. We have started doing like pop-up booths in the lobby of Join the Worship Team. We've started sending worship recruiting paragraphs in the weekly campus emails. We send out a weekly email from our campuses to the people on our database. We've also started making announcements on stage, which we have not done that in years. I think I've worked at River Valley for over 8 years, and I have never once made a weekend announcement about auditions.
I heard it for the first time last week. I was at Faribault, and I heard that, and I thought, that's the first time I've ever heard that, which isn't bad, but it's just we have more campuses,
we're in a new
we have more
season.
people.
We're in a new season,
We're in a
and
need.
it's a little scary because you could get some people that maybe don't have the skill. Something that Belle and I have been doing is when we have somebody reach out, we always have singers. It's always singers. It's like, also we need some instrumentalists, but
Please come.
I have felt this conviction from the Lord of if a person doesn't have the exact skill yet, but maybe they could get there. We've started giving them voice lessons once a month and resourcing them with like apps or programs that help them learn how to sing harmony, so that instead of just saying no, it feels like we also invest in them and minister to them as worship ministers. And we've been surprised. A couple of our people have really improved in the months. And then when they come to join the team, they're actually really bringing a ton of value. And I think so I'll be done in a second, but a couple pitfalls are you put people on the team because you don't want to say no, but then over time they realize and they become frustrated because they're not bringing as much value. They start to see for themselves, I don't have the skill. And it's a bad place to put a person for them to feel that frustration. So we've seen a lot of success with that, onboarding people, resourcing them, and working with them until they're ready to join the team. We have had a couple people who weren't going to get there, and somehow, by the power of God and the Holy Spirit inside of them, they realized, I don't really have what it takes, and that problem solved itself, which is awesome. Okay, I'll be done for now. You guys can chime
That's all
in.
good things. No, that's so true. Like, it really is hard because, especially being a non-confrontational person, it's hard to sometimes tell somebody no. But I think it's a really healthy and loving thing when we get to do that because, again, it like is another way of saying, I want you to find where you are going to use your gifts at best. And maybe worship is just not that place, we don't want you to be stuck in a place that is not going to have you flourish and grow. And so for younger students in particular, I think one of the biggest things that I love to do is just build relationship. Sometimes I would have never known that a student or a young person would be interested in worship or be even a singer or an instrumentalist until I've gotten to know them a little bit. And then they kind of open up to me and they're like, hey, I actually have been trying to learn guitar or whatever. I like to sing a little. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's such a good place. Like, to come and learn, like come try to join in the worship team. And so I think for youth at Apple Valley specifically, I do try to give a little grace to maybe if some students are not as like natural or still learning, because, I want them to understand like this isn't a talent show. Like this doesn't need to be American Idol. Like you can be, struggle a little bit and try to grow and learn as you're playing at youth services. And so I think the pastors are also really gracious and good at, still having a level of excellence and wanting to meet a standard, but also allowing kids to make mistakes and to grow and learn. And so I just love to get to know you students and also just try to call out things in them. I mean, listening to the Holy Spirit is no small thing. Sometimes I'll even just mention it because I feel a prompting and it will just open up a door, whether it's on the weekend or on a Wednesday. Just being out in the lobby, being among people is such a good thing to do as a worship leader, because it also allows people to see that, oh, they're available for me to go up and talk to them.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think not being in the green room the whole time is a great way to recruit people, right? Or
That's win number one.
maybe not
Yes.
every church has a green room, but even just the back room or being on your phone in the lobby or only hanging out with the team that you have, I think is a huge thing. You mentioned American Idol, and what's funny is how many people on these shows say, I grew up singing in church or I grew up playing in church. And it's really most people's first starting point to actually getting up on a stage, and it's not a performance, but playing in front of people, it's usually people's first opportunity. So we talk about that. It's maybe it's someone's first time on the team. They're nervous, they're frustrated, or that they're maybe not as good as they thought they'd be, or they're really trying to get their parts down. Like, how does that look to somebody who maybe it's their first time?
Yep. I love the worship onboarding process. I have grown in the last year and a half to love it so much. And I'm so thankful that God gives us creative ways and ideas to do it. Because at a mobile campus, I saw it as a challenge. I'm like, how am I going to do this? We don't have a space. We don't have a piano just sitting in my office. It's so hard. But I'm just thankful for the grace of God. So with that said, I have a youth student who began playing acoustic guitar a year and a half ago. And as a youth student, picking up an instrument can be a hard thing. They want to play on the weekends, they want to serve, but they're learning a whole entire new thing that they've never done before. And so something that I did with him is I had him come to set up every single Sunday and sit in on our rehearsals. Every Sunday, he was sitting in the chairs, practicing, looking at a chord chart to every single song that we did. I mean, months went by, and he was so faithful to do that. Now he's playing on the weekend, which is awesome, and I'm so proud of him. And then I think about the vocalists who come in and want to serve. We use in-ears and tracks, and there's so much happening in our ears during a worship set. Every one of our campus has an MD. So we have someone talking to us along with a guide in the tracks, like telling us what part we're about to sing. And so it can be very intimidating for new vocalists. And so what I've enjoyed doing and I've seen as a success so far is I invite the people who have never experienced that before to come on an onboarding Sunday. That's what I call it. I have an aviom set up for them. I have in-ears for them if they don't have any of them. And then during the rehearsal, they're just sitting there and they're practicing panning their ears. They're practicing, what do I want to hear? What is this actually going to sound like? Because I know if I just throw them in on the first Sunday, they're going to be so distracted. They're going to be so intimidating, and it's going to take away from them worshiping. And it's just going to be a distraction for people. And that is kind of a scary thing to do. So as long as I can get people comfortable, and my intern, Grace, she's amazing, and I schedule her to be the onboarding host. So anytime someone new comes in, she's the one who's there during rehearsal, making sure they're okay, making sure they know how to use the avioms, and it's been a success.
Well, that's so brilliant, because I think a lot of times in the worship world, we're trying to fill a role.
Yep.
And if you think of kids ministry and you're going to train a kids volunteer, there's a lot of onboarding involved. But once you get past the initial audition, I think people think, oh, you know how to play?
You got it.
Let's get you on the stage. But what you're talking about is there's so many more factors that are involved. And I think there's maybe people listening that go, okay, well, that'd be nice if I could have someone that could sit on the sidelines. I need someone today. The problem is with that thinking is you're going to put that person in, then they're going to fail, and then you're going to have to find someone new after they're 2 months later, they're frustrated. Versus taking it slower and saying, I just want you to feel comfortable, not even just listening. Some people have never worn in-ears. They've only sung in their shower or they've only, like, they didn't think that they were going to have to wear these things, and then it's loud on stage, and then you have lights in your face, and you have people. Like, those are all things that I think we're used to as worship leaders or even as interns or volunteer staff who are listening that are just used to being up on stage a lot. I know for me all the time, like I'll do a prayer moment or I'll do offering. Just this last week, I had someone text me, great speech.
People don't, if they're not in the flow, they don't know.
Right.
And I will say, part of the biggest filter for developing a person is, am I throwing them in over their head? So am I throwing them in over their head with these in-ears and this click? Am I throwing them in over their head with this set? So as we schedule teams, as we schedule songs, we take into account, is this a strong MD weekend? Is this a strong bass weekend? And we schedule bands based on the strength of the players together. So I never want to put a brand new drummer with a brand new bass player and a brand new keys player. And I also don't want to give a brand new singer a whole song if I'm going to have them lead a song. It's always a great filter of, am I throwing this person in over their head? Am I setting them up to succeed? I don't want them to get frustrated, and I don't want them to flat out fail. And I think that's the thing we miss. We're so quick to recruit, and we just want to get it across the finish line. But there is a strength in filtering. Am I throwing them in over the head? If I'm not, then I can build a long-lasting development experience. If I am, it's going to crash and burn. And I have had seasons where I didn't do that well and I crash and burn. But when I focus on, is this throwing them in over their head, it usually is more successful, which is awesome.
One of the things you said, Emily, was you did that during rehearsal and during the times when things are actually happening. What are maybe like a practical, if it's like a one hack or just things that you've learned over the years being on the team as a rehearsal? What, like, is there something that makes a great rehearsal? You mentioned having people all coming at the same time, being in unity, some ideas, but are there any other things that maybe could just half the people listening know it, but the other half go, oh my goodness, that helped me a ton. Is there anything that comes to mind when you think of a rehearsal that when we made this shift or when we started doing this or when we stopped doing this, it really made a difference?
I think having an MD, a music director, is a big deal. And I understand that not every church has the privilege of having someone like that. But if you do, I would think as long as the worship leader and the MD are in great unity and communicate during the week, so we know the plan going into a Sunday rehearsal, I think that's a win. And if you don't have a music director, because there's some weeks I don't have one, as long as you make sure you know going into a Sunday you are musically prepared and you can communicate to the entire team what the expectation is, I think that's a huge win. What
is our expectation of a music director on a weekend? Like, what are they typically doing in their responsibility?
Yeah, so they usually are leading the band in the talkback mic, which is a microphone you can only hear in the in-ears. They're following the worship leader, but usually MDs are responsible for setting up the Ableton set and then also leading the band. They partner with the worship leader to lead the rehearsal, knowing what chord does every song end on, what transition is this going to be like, did we edit the tracks, did we edit the flow of the song from what you were listening to on PCO. And I will say, I think Planning Center and Song Select and CCLI have made worship leaders like a teeny bit lazy, like we don't have to be as prepared. And something that we just started implementing, which I learned from one of our other campus worship leaders, is we send out a weekly email about every single song that we're doing in the set is it different than the MP3 you're listening to in Planning Center? And how is it different? And is there anything special in the service, and why is it there? And so it gives people a little bit more ownership of, I'm coming prepared. I've been told by the worship leader and the music director, here's something to note, and it sets you up to succeed. I think we can get a little bit lax because worship happens every 6 or 7 days. 6 for Apple Valley. We have Saturdays. It just rolls around every 6 days, and you forget that some people aren't there weekly with you. Your mind may feel really in the flow because it's happening all the time, but your volunteers don't always feel so in the rhythm because it's less frequent for them. So getting information out in front of them is good for you to not be so reliant on other resources, but good for your team to come prepared.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you think about leading in youth versus the weekends, what has been the biggest difference for you with teams, and has it felt pretty similar, or what has that felt like?
Yeah, well, I mean, teenagers and students, they're amazing. Like, I just want to start with that. They're the best. We love them. I do think sometimes can be difficult on Wednesdays because not everybody is either as prepared as you'd want them to be, or sometimes just the attention spans of listening and of staying in the moment, like, all right, everyone, we got to get through this, we got to get this done, isn't as easy. But I've been learning to give kids more credit than, maybe I have in the past, because I think sometimes it really just takes me as a leader calling them up higher for them to really step into something that, like, oh, I didn't know that I could lead in this way until, Bella, as my worship leader, like, called me up in it, And so I would say that's probably the biggest difference, though, is just dealing with and navigating with the attention spans, just the moods or the attitudes. Adults generally are very, very obliging and a lot more, just a lot better at being just open to what you have to say and listening. But I would say for sure both, like, there's pros and cons to both sides of it.
Yeah, I mean, you get the youthful energy, you get, and I think a trajectory of growth to where, I mean, I think of some of my friends, and not all of them are still in Minneapolis area, but Austin, he's our audio lead, and friend Daniel, who he now is like a touring musician all throughout Asia. And we grew up in the church, and, like, we were not that good. I mean, Daniel was probably better than us, but Austin, incredible guitar player, and I was a bass player, and we had this little band together. And I just remember, like, looking back at where we started, and now to look at how Austin's literally doing that for his job, and Daniel's doing that for his job. Like, it's awesome just to see. And so I would just encourage people who they maybe have a kid in their church who's a drummer, or a kid in their church who's a bass player. It doesn't mean that's what they're going to do for their job professionally, but it also doesn't mean they won't. And I just think the amount of people that we've seen in our church that are using music to be a big part of their life is incredible. And so encouraging pastors who are listening, maybe they're not even a worship pastor and they're just a lead pastor or an associate or executive, and they're listening to this. Like, this is people's gifts. God has gifted them in this way. Yeah. And so we have to be intentional. And on that note, one of the biggest things that I've seen that can be a struggle is we talk about the need for recruiting, but there's usually somebody at every church that is the week in, week out. They're the keyboard player or they're the drummer, and that is their identity. And they take no time off, and you're scheduling them every week, and they are always an accept because that is what they're there to do. But what that does is it puts a lock on that role.
It totally does.
Right.
And you can't develop anyone. And then maybe they go to a different campus, maybe they're on vacation, and you're in a frantic position. So how have you managed some of those conversations with people who they're actually good at what they do? They're not bad, but their identity is in the role, and it's creating a traffic jam.
Yeah. To me, it's always about casting vision. I will say there are some hard people that are hard to move from those positions. I'm a worship pastor's kid as well, and from the South and from an older church, and it's really hard to remove long-standing people. But it's casting vision, like, I need you to help me develop another person for this place. And what I'd love for you to do is meet with them. What I'd love for you to do is let them shadow you through an entire rehearsal on a Sunday. What I'd love for you to do is I do this with some of my drummers. I would love for you to come while this person is playing drums and give them feedback during the whole rehearsal on Sunday morning before the service. And then I want you to sit in the services and touch base with them after. So it's allowing them to be a part of the process rather than saying, I'm going to remove your entire responsibility to make room for somebody else. It's saying, I'm going to give you a new responsibility that instead of just removing, I'm going to replace it with something that maybe you don't see as important now, but I'm not stripping you away of every bit of responsibility.
Right.
And that usually gets people in the flow a lot better.
Yeah, that's such a good response. What about somebody that's been scheduled and they didn't do a very good job, and now they're going, Bella, Emily, why am I not getting scheduled anymore?
Yeah, well, I think I've had to have a couple conversations like that. And the best thing is just to be honest. And I think for sure sometimes people are going to take it, in a way that may not feel so good. And that's okay too. But I think for sure at the end of the day, just praying over them, praying with them, saying like, we still want to find a way for you to be involved. Kind of like Ben said too, like sometimes if it's somebody who is good, but you just want to develop other people, find a new way for them to be involved. And so I just think, just kind of ripping the Band-Aid off and just saying, having a clarifying conversation as soon as possible is the most loving way, at least that I've experienced.
Yeah, the longer gap there is, the worse it gets.
Totally. And always resourcing them. It's like, if they're not there yet, don't just say you're not there yet. Here are some things that you could do or things that you could use to improve. You never just want to say to a person, you don't have what it takes. You always want to say, you're not there yet, but here are some things I know could help you. Here are some resources I know could help you, because it softens the blow a little bit. Right. I did want to say one thing that we implemented this year as a worship team, as a worship department, which was amazing, was we took all of our interns and we did this thing called an intern sound check, where we assigned all of them, all campus-wide, into bands, and they played full worship sets for us, for some of our worship leaders, and for some of our high-level musicians, some of the best musicians from our campus. And then after their worship set, they got live feedback from musicians and from worship leaders.
It was awesome.
It was really great. It was like a little bit funny because you're trying to navigate, we're worshiping, but we also know people are giving us feedback. But it was awesome. And I think the biggest win in that for me, in my opinion, was it was separate from the weekend. And I think a lot of the time, and it was separate from a weekend rehearsal. When you're having a rehearsal or a weekend, there's a task at hand, and you're pressed for time and you're focused on the end result, which is good. You should be. When you can have a whole nother thing dedicated to development, a whole nother experience, then you can really focus on development. As a worship leader, it's so hard to keep your mind on, how can I help them grow, and how can I be led by the Spirit? How can I make sure this is moving forward? So giving yourself and your musicians a secondary option made for development was huge for us. I mean, it was huge for us. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, like one day we're going to be out of our roles. We're not going to be doing this anymore. And I feel like it's an awesome responsibility as a worship leader to develop the people after us. I just feel like that is what makes a good worship leader. If you can be intentional about developing even people on your team who are older than you, or your peers, or the next generation, that's going to be the biggest win, and you're just setting up everyone for success.
So
it's
true.
Awesome. It's a privilege. That's how I see it.
So true.
It's awesome.
The more you lead with an open hand, the more space you make for more people, the more people will come. The less space you make, the less people feel like they can be involved. The more I can share what I have, the more people feel like, oh, well, Ben is inclusive. Ben shares. I can tell there's lots of different types of people, different ages, different races, different backgrounds, different skill levels. Then I want to be involved. The more exclusive I am, the less people are inspired to want to speak up and say, hey, I can sing a little. It's kind of scary to say that to a worship leader. But if you can be inclusive, it's less scary.
Yeah, that's so good. In terms of your own experience at church, being a worship leader, and again, whether you're paid or volunteer, the same is true. You're focused during the service, especially at the beginning of service. You're leading the worship set. Then at maybe the end of service, you're coming up at the end of the message. How have you made time for yourself you're always on every weekend, to actually stay grounded and plugged in? And I mean, you could attend church every week, but you're actually not really a part of the service. You're almost, I mean, you are a part of the service, but you're not experiencing the service. How have you guys managed that? And obviously for those who have, bigger staffs like us, maybe it looks a little bit different. But even for that volunteer worship leader that's doing it every single week and that's their call and maybe they don't get paid for it, eventually you're not going to have any gas left in the tank. So how have you intentionally kept yourself having gas in the tank? And is it taking weeks off? Is it what does that look like for you all? And maybe you guys can talk about it at Apple Valley, and then even you can share about it at Maple Grove.
I think one thing that I did wrong a few years ago was every Sunday that I did have off, I would lead worship somewhere else, which was silly. I wasn't being intentional.
Like another church?
Or at an event. And I would use vacation to go, but I wasn't taking vacation. So actually using your time off. Mm-hmm. I also think God graces you with the ability to do it. But you have to worship God in your own time. Like this is not my time to worship God on a Sunday, although I am worshiping him. I get my alone time with God in the week. And one thing that really helps me, I listen through the entire set in order of what we're going to do on a Sunday by myself at least a couple times a week. And I get my heart on all the songs, and I get my heart on God for me. And then the second time, I get my heart on God for what do you want to say to your church? What do you want to do in this set this weekend? So that's some practical things. I try to spend as much time as I can with God, with just me and him. Worshiping him. I'm not talking about the word and prayer, although I do that as well. But as a worshiper, I want to worship God alone. And then also, I got to take my time off and use it right. I got to use my time off right. And resting is not sleeping. I used to do that wrong too. I'd be like, if I can just get like 10 hours of sleep tonight, I feel amazing. And it was never enough because resting is more than sleeping.
Yeah, I think for me, also like leaning more towards the introvert side, sometimes I can get drained very quickly from just being around a lot of people all day or, being on a platform and leading worship. But I would say like Sunday's the smallest part of my faith, because there's, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And so I want to make sure that I'm filling myself up as much. So on Sunday, when I know that's probably going to be the biggest day I'm pouring out, I want to make sure that I'm filled and continually being filled, because how am I going to be able to give my best worship and lead people in the way that I need to lead people? Also, I mean, at least I know at Apple Valley, we try to hold a standard for our volunteers and as well as ourselves to sit in service as much as we can. Like, of course, I know we go up at the end, so sometimes we have to pop out or sit towards the back so we don't distract anybody. But, just having that standard of like, when we are not on the platform, like we're among the congregation. We're not having a little huddle and, powwow in our green room. Like we're sitting, listening, actively engaging. Yeah. And so it just really helps breed more unity among just what we do. Like it's just not the worship clique. It's, we're the church. And so I just love having that expectation on Wednesdays as well. After worship, the students just don't sit in the back like, no, you got to go out and listen to the message and be in the small groups. And so that's just something we've done.
Yeah, I think from wanting to be excellent and wanting to be polished, I think sometimes can be a detriment to where even like you mentioned, maybe it's sitting in the back and kind of sneaking out and getting into the right positions. And in certain auditoriums that makes sense. But also the other side, I think we think in terms of production so much to where we go, oh, well, that might be a distraction to people. But it also might be a good thing if you're sitting on the front row and he calls the band and you stand up and go. And again, not in a distracting way, but just, you keep your head down, you go up to your spot. But people seeing, oh, they were in the service. That was the bass player that was sitting in front of me. Right. Yeah. And so I think in the name of excellence, in the name of seamless transitions and all of this, let's not miss that we're a church. And I've been a victim of this so many times. I've told this story before, but my very first young adult event, I was just so frustrated that the baptismal tanks were up. And I wanted there to be a room at the front for like, excited worship and altar time and everything. And the baptismal was just right in the way. And I was so frustrated. And I remember Pastor Lindsay at the time, she's since retired, but she came up to me and she said, "Why are you so frustrated?" I said, well, it was in the way, and I asked them not to put it up. She goes, "It's Friday. We have baptisms tomorrow night. Do you want the tub to be freezing cold for the people who are saying, I'm going from death to life, or do you want it to be warm? Who cares? Legendary. We're a church." And I just remember her telling me that and kind of feeling like, okay, I'm stupid. I was like, well, what is my dad going to think? And he came out and he's like, oh, are we doing baptism tonight? I said, oh, tomorrow they're just warming the tank. He's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And I just remember feeling so stupid about that. And so whatever it is, it's like, oh, well, that guitar doesn't look right, or they don't dress right. It's like, again, they have to be appropriate, but if we're trying to become something, then we've missed the whole point of it all.
Yes.
And so I just think it's a good reminder to us to say, like, we're a church. And again, why we're having this conversation is because it's not, let's go out and find the best musicians and pay them to lead. It's, no, let's develop people to use their gifts in ministry. And so, anyways, Emily, any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, at a mobile campus, there are 0 breaks in the morning. So I remember we started at Whirly Ball. We were there at 6 a.m.
Whirly Ball is like a blend between bumper cars and like lacrosse.
Exactly I don't know who thought of that.
It was wild, and I'm so thankful. Oh my gosh, we're in a high school now, and it's awesome. But back at Whirly Ball, we were setting up a stage. I mean, we had the platforms, and then we had a road case filled with the legs. We were doing everything every Sunday morning. And then once we're done setting up, we immediately start rehearsal. I was thankful I had time to change on a Sunday morning. But I was just thinking, like, all the different hats that I have to put on before a service begins. It's like, okay, I have to make sure I set up well and I have a good attitude while doing this. Now I have to make sure that the musicians are all in tune for rehearsal, the vocalists are singing the right things, and now it's time for service. Now I have to make sure, like, Holy Spirit, I hear from you. I truly am your vessel so that you can speak to your people today. And at first it was hard. I'm like, how do I do this? And I just echo what Bella and Ben has said. It is how you prepare during the week. God, 100%, if he's calling you to do something, there is a unique grace on your life to do it and to do it well. And I do the same thing as Ben. I listen through the set from top to bottom, but every single morning, actually, when I get ready, I'm just in my bathroom getting ready, I have a playlist. It's called Him and I, and it's just songs that we'll never do on the weekend probably, but it's just spontaneous, stripped back worship songs. And I just use that time to, like, sing out in the Spirit, sing what's on my heart. And that's just my time to prepare. And usually it's then the Lord will kind of, like, show me what might take place on Sunday, or he'll drop in some sort of vision or word on my heart in that moment to prepare for a Sunday. And if you are loving the Lord and getting filled up during the week, Sunday is going to be awesome, and you're going to be excited to do it too.
Emily, I never thought about it as like hats and layers. Like, you have servant, you have leader, you have shepherd. Like, you're setting up, you're preparing, then you're leading the rehearsal, then you're shepherding the room. And thinking about, what does it take for me the days before this service to prepare myself to be a servant, to be a leader, to be a shepherd? That is a beautiful thought of the layers of that. That is, like, amazing. I was going to say this one thing too. We can take a lot of pressure off ourselves by realizing, like, 90% of the room doesn't even hear it the way we hear it.
That's true.
Sometimes I'm developing new people and somebody's like, that person was amazing. And I'm thinking, they're really green. But they thought they were amazing. Or they'll comment on how well they worshiped, not how well it sounded.
Totally.
So we can also relieve ourselves of the pressure of 90% of the room isn't even hearing it with the same ears we are.
Oh, yeah. My brother-in-law, he was at Christmas Eve at Apple Valley, and he goes, that drummer is awesome. He wasn't talking about how good of a drummer was. He was talking about just the way he worshiped. It was Jake. And,
Jake gives it his all.
Yeah, and he was just like, that is awesome to see. And so I think, to your point, 90% people have no idea, and they're saying a great speech or a great song or whatever it is, and most people are terrified to even get up on the stage.
Right.
And so for anyone that has the confidence to stand in front of people on a stage, most people in the congregation are just overwhelmed by that idea. And so they'll come up to you, even if you go, oh, I totally missed that part, or my voice cracked or whatever. I could never do what you do. You know?
Exactly.
And it's in not a boastful way, but it's just a reminder that that's a gift from God. As we wrap this up, I thought of a fun question. What is your favorite song that when you see you're leading it on the schedule? Well, obviously, you guys are probably scheduling yourselves.
Yeah.
But, like, if you see it, you go, that's one that I love to lead. Like I'm super excited. I'm not going to do the negative because we might have friends from those churches that are listening to this podcast, and that's
I never schedule myself to sing the ones I don't like.
Yes,
so.
yes. But like if
true.
if you're scheduling yourself and you kind of are going through the list of songs, and you go, okay, I'm going to lead that one, or you're leading at a conference or event that someone else scheduled for you, and you're like, yes, I love leading this song. What song is that?
Oh gosh,
This
who
is
wants to
so
go
hard.
first? I need a little time to think.
This is a hard
I
question.
mean, Jesus, We Love You. We don't do that as much, but that's like my favorite song in the whole wide world to
Yeah, it's a
sing
good one.
forever, 5 ever. And then I would say Goodness of God. I mean, I lost my voice for a season and the Lord gave it back to me, and I'm just so thankful. I will say I love to hear Bella sing Holy Forever. So if that's on the set, I'm giving it to Bella because she rips it.
Well, thank you for that. I do love Holy Forever, but I would say one right now. We haven't done it a little bit because we did it a lot, but I do love leading I Speak Jesus by Charity Gale. I think it's just such a declarative song, and, you know, it just gets the room going because it's so true. Like the one specific line that always gets me where I'm like, oh, I got to hold it in so I don't cry, is the Jesus for my family. I speak the holy name of Jesus. And so I just think that's such a powerful line. And so that whole song is just so good for me.
Whenever that song starts, you hear all the Christian radio moms just, oh, yes,
Yep.
this is my song.
Yep.
You know, they're just pumped. You let it, I don't know, maybe it was a month ago, but you let it, and I just remembered, even the room was rustling when you started it. You could just tell they were, this is
excited.
it.
And everybody's like, yeah.
Iconic intro.
Yeah. I think one of my all-time favorite songs to lead is Living Hope.
Oh, and
Yeah.
you rip it too.
I
That's your
love that song.
You rip
I
that
love
one, too.
leading it. Yeah.
That's it. Well, for me, my favorite song to
Yeah,
lead.
please
You
tell
used
us,
to play
Logan.
bass for me back in the day.
I
downtown.
did. I played bass. I mean, for all of our campuses at one point. Now I haven't played in a while.
I got to
but-
schedule you.
Yeah.
Now I know he hasn't done Maple
do it all. He
Grove.
can do it all.
Yeah,
Make sure he
I don't
comes
know.
to an
We're in need,
onboarding
Logan.
Sunday. Make sure he
We're
comes.
in
It's
need.
been a while.
I haven't used the AVMs in a bit. But
Onboarding Sunday for
yeah,
Logan.
no, I'm a basement bass player now. You know, just
yes.
in me in my basement. But thank you for chatting through this. I know it's been helpful for a lot of people that are listening, whether they're a worship leader or not, or they're interested in that, or maybe they're a volunteer wanting to learn more about how they can get better, or a lead pastor saying, I don't really know the tensions of this, but I'm trying to understand my worship team better. I'm just grateful that you guys spent the time and poured into people through the network and through Talking Church. So until next time, keep ripping it and leading us. It's amazing that we get to do what we do. And if you are local and you are a musician and you want to try out for our worship team, you can reach out to us. We'd love to have you.
You
Hallelujah.
totally can.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for listening to Talking Church on YouTube. I hope this episode was helpful for you. You can find a bunch of different episodes right here that are linked that maybe you've not caught up yet, or maybe this is new to you, finding Talking Church. Would you consider subscribing to the YouTube channel? It helps us out a lot. Get this message out there to more people, and hopefully helps you out as well. And feel free, write a comment, ask us a question. We want to hear from you. Thanks so much for being a listener to Talking Church. We'll see you back soon.